Hello and welcome back to Chaotic Insights, where I break down the TV show Chaotic. And today we'll be talking about episodes 12 and 13 from season 2, From the Deep and From the Deep Part 2. So, grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. Kaz and Summary are on a scan quest at Ice Pillar because Hearing told Kaz that the Underworlders found something. And we discover that Kaibon and Jigarex found a frozen creature. They defrost the creature and heal him with music, and we learn his name is Felfor. Kaz and Sarah both get scans and poured out. Back at Chaotic, Tom and Peyton are watching the end of Clay's match with Vile versus Gnarless, and Kaz tells them about Felfor. Peyton and Kaz then port to Kaor's castle to try to get 2 more Felfor scans, while Tom and Kaz test out the Felfor scan in the beta drone. Spider catches Kaz and Peyton sneaking around, but they evade him, and while Tom and Sarah battle, Felfor falls into the water and transforms. Then the real Felfor approaches Kaor and reveals that there is a secret fifth tribe in Param who's been hiding behind the doors of the deep mines. Back in the Betadrome, Felfor uses his mind control to get Tom's Thunder to destroy himself. Tom and Sarah are spooked, and Felfor tells Kaor that the Marillions have the Kathaka, and that's where part 1 ends. Then we pick up the story with Felfor trying to convince Kaor to open the doors of the deep mines, and Felfor revealing that he himself is a Marillion. Kaor is suspicious of Felfor and asks Kaibon to take him back to the guest chambers so that he has time to deliberate. And there, Felfor uses mind control to convince Kaibon that Von Blut should open the doors to the deep mines. So, Kaibon goes to tell Von Blut, and then we see a 3 versus 1 Betadrome battle where Felfor uses mind tricks to get Tom, Peyton, and Sarah to all code each other, while Kaz, playing as Felfor, wins. The humans then decide to alternate watching the doors of the deep mine to see if anything goes down. Kaor decides Felfor is lying, and so Felfor attacks him. Kaor resists Felfor's mind control, but Felfor takes the information he needs from Kaor's mind to open the doors of the deep mines. Then Von Blut and his army and Atropol march to the doors to try to open them, but they are intercepted by Kaor and Takinam and their army. Kaor then peels off and goes directly to the doors, suspecting that Von Blut is just a diversion. And he's correct. He finds Felfor mind-controlling the guards, successfully opening the doors of the deep mines. And we see 4 Marillions emerge. Ooh, okay, good episode. On to analysis. So let's start off with love these episodes. Love these episodes. They are informative, they build tension. There's mystery, there's drama, there's intrigue, there's politics, there's deception. There's there's juice and meat and substance to these episodes. They're 2 big juicy episodes, and I think they are done phenomenally. They are so good, and they have good pacing, and they have stakes, and it's just quality entertainment that hooks you in, and it delivers on what it's promising. So let's start off with the way that they frame these episodes. We kind of get these episodes from Kaz's perspective, in the A plot, meaning we follow Kaz discovering Felfor in Ice Pillar, to learning about Marillions in Kaor's castle, to seeing the doors of the deep mine get open, right? We are following along with the human perspective of Kaz as these big events happen. And Kaz is just an observer to all of these events. And the B plot then becomes the Betadrome matches that you could say follows Tom's perspective. And I don't mean that exclusively. This isn't a first person perspective, but we are limited to the observer's eye. We learn what Kaz and Tom learn, and a little bit extra here and there. But the way that they frame the episode is we're following Kaz around, seeing what he sees. and we're following Tom around, seeing what he learns in the Betadrome. Of course, we still see some private interactions, say between Kaor and Felfor, or between Felfor and Kaiban. So like we do have this like third person omniscient point of view, but the script still holds back information in order to build tension in a way that makes sense narratively. So I do think it's interesting that in these episodes that the humans really are just observers to these events, right? They watch Felfour get saved, they watch the doors get unlocked, they hear Felfour's story, but their actions don't really impact the plot at all. Like in a typical episode, you would think like one of our human characters gets mixed into the Param plot. Like Eye of the Maelstrom, where like they get mixed in there and they help get the music to the Eye of the Storm. Or like in the Maze of Lissek, where Tom helps to restore Maxor's powers. Right? These are examples of like chaotic episodes where we see the humans have a direct impact on the Param plot, but not these episodes. These episodes, they're strictly observers, and they don't interfere. Our humans really have no impact on if the doors get opened or not. They're just there to watch to see if they do. So that begs the question, like, if they don't impact the plot, why are they here? And it's because they are the entry point to our story, right? We're following Kaz around, learning as he learns. We're following Tom around, learning as he learns. And the B plot, the Betadrome matches, serve as extra context. They provide extra information that we don't learn strictly from Kaor's interaction with Felfor, right? The mind control thing, they set that up in the Betadrome, and then like Sarah and Tom get spooked, and then they use it with Kaor. So the human experience in these episodes provide this greater context for the story, and also as an entry point for us as an audience. And this B plot in the Betadrome, the humans discovering Felfor, at first they think he's an underworld creature who's good at water attacks, right? Which, they point out like Noctilax is an example of one of those. And so it's rare, but it's not impossible. Or like Stelgar even. But until he transforms, that's really a turning point. When Felfor falls into the water and he transforms into the aquatic creature with like tentacles and is creepy and spooky, and they really emphasize how ugly he is, that's like a turning point in this episode. And we get this mind control reveal first in the drum, which lays that foundation for Felfor to attack in the same way, trying the mind control. And also, the humans are the first to reveal Felfor's power, his special abilities, and the danger that he holds. And so, again, it helps to foreshadow that Felfor is up to something nefarious because he's powerful and specific and dangerous. And in the second match, when they're doing 3v1, that further demonstrates his increased psychic ability, his psychic power, proving that Felfor is not just a worthy physical opponent, but also a strategic one. And, with those mind games that he can play, really makes him a threat in Param, specifically to Kaor and the Underworld. Plus, this action-oriented B-plot regularly breaks up Felfor's like storytelling ability, his conversation with Kaor, and it prevents it from becoming monotonous. Felfor's story is a lot of exposition, it's a lot of laying foundation, it's a lot of just information that you need to know going into this titular Marillion invasion arc. And with an info dump like that, they strategically create breaks in the information to, one, withhold information, but two, to allow for this B plot to break up the information with action-oriented excitement, which further draws the story out, builds tension, and creates space for each new reveal to resonate. Breaking up the monologue allows each twist to have its own moment. The I am a Marillion is different from the Marillions are behind the deep mines and they have the Kathaka, right? Those are two separate things. And allowing the action-oriented excitement to break them up allows for them to each be their own moment. So really, like, let's talk about Felfor. And he does tell us a lot of things, but also I think his actions speak volumes. This is a big, like, show don't tell episode, which of course is like, advice people give to writers. When you're writing a script, you want to show, not tell. Like, show that Falfour is nefarious. Don't just say Falfour is nefarious. And so we have to pay just as much attention to Falfour's actions as what he says to get this whole picture. Because Falfour, I hate to say, is lying. He is twisting the truth. He is being intentionally deceitful in order to get what he wants. And so, with that manipulation tactic, how much can we trust him as an audience to be a reliable narrator? So, we have to pay just as much attention to his actions to differentiate what he's saying is true versus what he's saying is manipulation. And a lot of cues that we get here are visual. So, like the powerful attacks Felfour uses in the drome, the tentacle transformation, even the mind control. Never in these episodes do they explicitly say Falfour has mind control, but they show it, right? They show his glowing eyes, they show Thonder's expression change and how his actions have been affected. And they also show it with Kaor, how Kaor is trying to fight it physically, and how the guards turn on Kaor. They never really say explicitly, like, Falfour is a character with mind control, but they show it. They show it through these actions. And so you have to be paying attention to understand the gravity and also like the information being displayed. And so with mind control, they don't have him out here saying the words, I'm Falfour and I can do mind control. They show it. And on top of that, we have this question of, is Falfour a reliable narrator? And he's giving us a lot of new information, which ultimately Kaor decides not to take his advice. And Falfour strings out the information in a very specific order that, first he says he got frozen when battling Marillions, right? So he doesn't right out the gate say, I'm a Marillion. He says, I was fighting Marillions. Then Marillions are behind the doors of the deep mine. Then the doors were meant to keep others out because the Marillions have the Kafka. Then he reveals that he is a Marillion. And so in that technique of revealing that he's a Marillion last, it's part of his persuasion. It's part of his manipulative tactics. It's a foot in the door technique, right? He's telling the story, and first he's putting his foot in the door saying, I was battling Marillions, and then he, like, blows the door open and says, I am one. Which impacts, saying I was fighting Marillions, and him also being a Marillion also adds context to those original statements. So, Falfour positions himself as an opponent of the Marillions to help better appeal to the Underworlders, and he's casting the Marillions as the other, right? He's casting them as the enemy, thus creating an in-group, out-group of, I'm one of the Underworlders. I'm in the in-group with you, Kaor, and casting the Marillions as an out-group. But then, when he says the doors were meant to keep everyone else out, he doubles down on this technique. Falfour is saying the Marillions have something you want. Like, that's the out group, but they have something you want. So really, he's flipping it on his head and saying, they're the in group, you're the out group. Like, establishing that dichotomy originally is a tactic, and then he flips it on his head to try to make Kaor jealous. And using that emotional manipulation, the jealousy, that's how he frames the you should open the doors of the deep mine to Kaor. And ultimately, that is his argument. He frames the story in a way that the Marillions are greedy and hogging the Kafka, so we need to open the doors so that we can share that with everyone, so that more people can experience the joy and the revelation that is the Kafka. In persuasion, logos, ethos, pathos, am I right? So, pathos, Falfour is appealing to emotions. He's trying to create this anger and jealousy in Kaor, trying to motivate him to open the doors. Logos, logic, reason. So if this, then this. If you open the doors, everyone can experience the Kafka, right? It'll not just improve your quality of life, it will improve everyone's quality of life. So really, it would be bad if you didn't. There's an if this, then this kind of bartering system to that. Or you could also do, if you take the Kafka, the Underworlders will have more power, right? There's this strategic element of, if you open the doors, you will gain something. If this, then this. And then ethos is establishing credibility for the speaker. How does Falfor create credibility for himself? He says, I am a Marillion. Boom, right at the end. I am a Marillion. Falfor is building credibility to his argument because he claims that not only has he seen the coffee fest firsthand, he is a first person account of this narrative. He is a reliable source, but he's also a part of the group that had it, right? So he is a Marillion and he has experienced the Kafka. That gives him a first person account of what it's like, and therefore relaying that information to Kaor, right? That's his credibility. I know because I've experienced it. And he also claims that the reason he was frozen was because he wanted to Robin Hood the Kafka and spread the wealth so that everybody could experience the bliss. And there is another example of him using ethos, establishing his own ethics and moral understanding to try to convince Kaor that opening the doors is the right thing. Right? He said, the reason why I was frozen in ice, the reason why you found me, is because I was on a mission doing good things, trying to help everyone. I'm a good creature, I can help people, right? And establishing that capacity is establishing his character and trying to build a trustworthiness within Falfor. And so, with all of that, with the persuasion techniques and spinning this story and crafting a narrative with good guys and bad guys and a call to action, Falcor's motivation for all of this is just to open the doors. His plan is to open the doors, and he's going to do that with Kaor or without Kaor. And so he has plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A, go to Kaor, the leader of the underworld. He gets unfrozen. He says, take me to your leader. And he gets taken there. And Kaor says, I'll hear you out. And then he says, that doesn't sound like a good plan to me. So plan A crossed off. Kaor's not going to be the person to open the doors. Plan B, himself. You know? He said, okay, I'm going to create a diversion, and if Kaor's not going to open it, then I'm going to do it myself. And then he also has plan C, Von Blue. If for some reason Belfour is unable to open the doors, and Von Blue defeats Kaor's army or gets past them or whatever that mechanic would be, he would have the assistance to overpower those creatures, open the doors. Ultimately, Plan B does work. Falfor opens the doors himself, and we start our next journey. So everything we learn in this episode is foundational for what's to come, how we understand Param, how we understand this dichotomy between Marillions and the Param creatures, and of course, we will come back to this episode and make connections and tie-ins of what did we learn from Falfor, and what are we experiencing in the titular Marillion invasion, right? It all starts here. So actually, let's talk about what we learned. So moving on to lore, the majority of this lore is Marillion related. And that makes sense because that's what these episodes are. So we learn about Falfor and his story, how Falfor was Captain America in ice for an estimated 2,000 solons. Long time. 2,000 solons. And so he was frozen from a time before this. He is alive to see another day. And we learn that Falfor is great at water attacks, and we learn that he can transform into an aquatically adept form. Perhaps he's more powerful underwater. And they make a point to call him ugly. And I hate to say that, but like they do. They have multiple characters just rag on the way he looks. He's nasty to look at. He's ugly, terrifying, whatever. And so making the point to call him ugly, disgusting, nasty to look at is a tactic to differentiate Falfor and the Marillions from these other Param creatures that they've seen. And additionally, the mind control stuff. So if Falfor is a Marillion, how many of these attributes are specific to Falfor as a creature, and how many of these attributes are representative of the tribe overall? And I would say more of these character traits are representative of the tribe overall than you would initially think, right? There's a reason why Falfor is the creature that is the spokesperson for the Marillions. He's the first person we're seeing. He's the first creature to introduce us, and that's because he really represents Marillions as a whole. Water attacks, aquatically adept form, being powerful, being unusual, and differently built than the creatures who already live in the overworld, the underworld, the Danian and Mepedian territories, and then also mind control. So like each of those come to be representative as Marillions as a whole. That's what makes Falfor a good introductory character, a good creature to use narratively to introduce this tribe. And then we also get Falfor's version of history. And so those are the things we've seen. We've seen his attacks, we've seen his power, how he looks, his mind control. We've seen all that. But we get the words coming out of his mouth, which after that analysis we know has been spun to have a persuasive effect. It's effectively propaganda. And so it's not a fair and objective account of history, and we have to take that into account when we are going over it. So Felfour claims that there was once 5 tribes in Param who live in peace, but the Marillions got the Kothica, which caused the other 4 tribes to band together to put the Marillions behind the doors of the deep mines. But the Marillions were actually hogging the Kothica, and so that was like intentional to go behind the doors and keep it for themselves. We also do get Agitos' 2 cents on the ancients wrote of a lost tribe, but modern scholars agree that they never existed, which gives some validity to Falfor's claim of an ancient 5th tribe. If there were these ancient writings, we know that the Merlians do exist. We see them emerge from the doors at the end of the episode. We know that is one thing of Falfor's story that's true. There is a 5th tribe, and they are behind the doors of the deep mines. The motivation there is a little murky. And then there's this whole Doors of the Deep Mines thing. We learn that this is the only thing that all 4 tribes agree on is posting a guard at the doors, like at all times. So it's a rotating roster, if you will, and today's roster was Nothalax, Tartarak, Vinta, and Junda, I believe. And so that's one creature from each tribe. And all the tribes agree on this, and their role is to guard the doors, wear a cloak, hold a lantern that has a music in it, and when all 4 of the music from one from each tribe is cast, it opens the doors. And of course, they all have their color coordinated capes, and now these lantern keys are octagonal, which I do think is interesting because in Chaotic, 7 is the magic number, and so like music is a 7-sided shape. And so the music itself can't be like in the octagonal lantern because it wouldn't fit. So I think the discrepancy between octagonal lantern keys and 7-sided music, right? I think we're supposed to believe that the music is in the lanterns, and it probably is, but those shapes don't like totally align in terms of, you know, fitting. But we do, of course, learn that behind the doors is a surplus of water as it spills out into the underworld. So we also see 4 Marillions emerge, and they're rather blurry, but I would identify them as Erektab, Ihun, Kalen, Rathtab, and Milaine. So jot that down. And so we see 4 Marillions emerge, and this surplus of water. And that surplus of water is consistent with what we learn about Falfor, how he's good at water, how he's aquatically adept. And going back a few episodes to the foreshadowing, where there is this great flood, it also aligns with that, where we see, I believe it was Milaine in that episode. Well, we see him come out of the doors now, so something in this timeline is matching up to something with that timeline. Now, we don't see like all of Param flood in this moment, and so that prophecy like hasn't been fulfilled yet, but the pieces are starting to click together. And we also do need to note that off camera, Tom goes to tell Maxor about this developing situation with Falfor and the doors, and so we get the information that the Overworlders have a source of information on this situation, and that is Tom. And so in the future, if the Overworlders are informed on the Marillion invasion, the titular Marillion invasion, we know why. It's because in this episode, Tom went up to the Overworld and he told Maxor about it. Now, moving on to one more piece of lore that I have written down is that Spider sees, like his vision is an hexagonal bug-like vision, which is more focused on light perception than like how we see. And we learn this because we get a point of view shot from Spider's perspective. Now, on to fun facts and other notes. I did write down that Falfor was frozen Captain America style, and like, this episode kind of is a play on that story. Like, what if Captain America was malicious, or Captain America had a direct mission, or what if Captain America was a failsafe for an ongoing war? What would that look like? And so we do kind of get this play on the Captain America story of like, what if Captain America was Velfor, and what's about to play out. So I do think the show differentiates enough between the characters for like them to feel like their own things, but I do think it's an interesting parallel to compare and contrast these characters because they're in very similar situations. They are characters who were frozen in time who re-emerge, and maybe one has an agenda and maybe one has a different agenda. And so that's like an interesting comparison to me. I also wrote down that Tom being a good friend, circling back to what Kaz was excited about. So there's the moment where Tom and Peyton are watching Clay's match, and Tom is like, "Wait a minute, I have to catch the match." And then he like turns back and goes, "Okay, what were you excited about?" That's a moment for Tom to be a good friend. And honestly, in season two, they're not giving Tom a lot of opportunities to like be a good friend. There's just moments in this season where Tom is like specifically chosen to be the villain. Like even the season finale of season one, you know? And so having this moment of Tom being a good friend, I think is important to highlight and to point out. And we also learn about Narlis and Vile and how Narlis is immune to music that lowers energy, and so that's good information to have, but also like sponsored content for Narlis, which we get similar sponsored content for Peyton and Sarah with their like physical playing cards when they are biding their time at the doors, just waiting for something to happen. And now that's corporate synergy, right? We get playing with the cards, we get playing in the drome. Now, did we get any online play in this episode? Not necessarily, but we had more important fish to fry. And with that, next on my list is, since when did Kaor have a castle? And let's talk about this because I swear in season one, Kaor's throne room, they like went to a random door in Underworld City and like knocked, and it was like could have been a secret passageway, right? Maybe it's supposed to be a discreet entrance into the castle, but like I swear this is the first time we see him having a castle, and it's like much more than just the throne room. It's guest chambers, it's guards, it's secret passageways. It's so big that you can do a Scooby-Doo style chase scene in it. And that's impressive. We're learning more and more about the underworld and about Param, and this just happens to be when they highlight Kaor's castle, and good for him for having a castle. You know, maybe I would have liked to see it in the skyline before this. But we also do get more information about the underworld in terms of we get the identical underworld soldiers, which don't bother me too much because they all have armor that's like reminiscent of Atropol's. And I think it's interesting that in this episode, Von Blue, his army all looks very similar, which is like suspicious. And also, Von Blute doesn't bring along Scythia and he doesn't bring along Krek in this episode. And so it's interesting that his inner circle changes. Like he just needs Atropol because he's more of a warrior. And creating a dynamic like open door policy in the Von Blute campaign. Like we know Krek is a coward, so he'll work with Kaor if he needs to, and he'll work with Von Blute if he needs to, like just whoever's scaring him more in the moment. But it's interesting that he had a change of staff, if you will, for this episode. Now, I do like the action in this episode, and there are some cool attacks and good strategic playing. And I want to point out the example of when Sarah is playing as Falfor and tries to jump back into the water, which in of itself is good strategy because Sarah as a player noticed Falfor does better in water, and so I'm going to get back to the water to become more powerful again, right? Good strategy from Sarah, but then Tom freezes the pond over, and that's good strategy from Tom because for him to acknowledge that strategy, see it, take the note and take action in the moment, great. And it wasn't like an attack we've never seen before, and it wasn't like some out of the blue, something that we couldn't expect. We saw that happen. We saw Felfour be good in the water. We saw Sarah make the choice, and we saw Tom prevent it. And so it's very easy to follow, and thinking strategically in this moment and following it as a viewer, I feel like it's very rewarding because it's more than just like the fantasy wrestling. You get to see the strategy behind it, and that's why like that sequence in and of itself is so interesting to me. Good. It's good writing. Now, another thing I want to mention is Falfour points to a map in this episode, which is in the style of map that, like, if you Google Underworld map and Overworld map, is in that same style. So I wonder how accurate it is because, well, two things. One, right, we know like Blazer is a cartographer, like he's making maps. And so how reliable are they? Because like at what point in history did our maps become as accurate as they are? Right? There were points before that where they were inaccurate. And so are they general? But if you find these maps, just know that they're canon in what the current understanding of the landscape of the overworld and underworld are. And I also want to mention that the characterization of Kaor in this episode, great, right? We talked about is Kaor a good role model? And he doesn't always do the right thing, but he as a character is often right. And this is like really represented in his interaction with Falfour because he accurately discerns Falfour's deception. And even when both of his advisors are maybe we should listen to him. Like if there's nothing there, we open the doors. If there's something there, we open the doors and we can get it, right? But he saw through that, and he also sees through using Von Blue as a diversion, and additionally, he has a strong mental fortitude to resist Felfour's mind control. And so far, he's the only one that we've been able to see resist the mind control. So let's jot that down in case it comes back. But in this episode, that characterization of he has strong mental fortitude and he is good at discernment, I think really goes to show what makes Kaor a good character. Now, really, my only issues with this episode, and it really isn't even an issue, but I do have to talk about it, and it is Falfour related, but it's like real life Falfour, and that is why does he have an Underworlder card? At no point did he ever claim to be an Underworlder. And sure, he doesn't say that he's a Marillion until part two, but in the first narrative story where he's introduced, Falfour himself knows that he's a Marillion. So why does he have an Underworld card? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't click. And I understand that like tribe is fluid, and so that begs the question like when you scan a creature, what does it use to determine the tribe? Is it a creature's own perception of what tribe they are? Is it society's perception of what tribe they are? Because that makes a big difference. These underworlders assume that Filfor is an underworlder, and so therefore maybe he would have an underworld card. But Falfour knows that he is a Marillion, so shouldn't he just automatically get a Marillion card? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe the chaotic developers didn't have the graphics ready, and so, like, they didn't show it? I don't know. But in real life, it bothers me. Because at no point was he an Underworlder. Like, Stelgar, maybe Stelgar started an Overworlder, and then he became an Underworlder through switching allegiance, or like through Danian parasites, you see that clear shift. But with Falfour, you don't have this clear shift because there is like a moment pre-deception and post-deception, but like the deception was never deception. He was never like undercover as a spy, and maybe that's like, if he was undercover as a spy, maybe that's something that would play with what tribe you scan as, but he wasn't. He came and like told the truth in his first interaction with Kaor. You know what I mean? So it bothers me. And I wonder if any of you have justification for that. Like especially if a creature is trying to like do a double cross, if a chaotic player came up to scan them, would that like ruin it? If they like expose their tribe allegiance, or if it says one thing and they say another, what's that discrepancy? Or is there one? I have questions. I do have an answer for this, and it's part of the meta narrative. It's not part of the chaotic lore itself, it's not in world, but it is, like, I understand it's part of the real world narrative, and by that I mean the Underworlder card for Fel4 came out in an earlier set than Marillion's, so it familiarizes the players with who Fel4 is, and they know him as an underworld creature, which creates a bigger reveal when it reveals that he is a Marillion. So, like, it's a synergy between playing in real life. If you're playing in real life and you have a Underworld Fel4 card, that builds tension, that builds the prior information that they want you to have. It's the game makers feeding you deception and not Falcor himself. And so trying to bring the TV show narrative into the cards, it's, and like vice versa. I think that's cool, and I like how Chaotic has layers like that, but I feel like in universe, it feels inaccurate to have an Underworld Falcor card. You know what I mean? But I like the concept of building deception through cards and then creating a twist. That's interesting. But, real world meta analysis versus in universe canon, those are two different things. My final fun facts here on the menu today, we have macaroni and cheese, which is mac and cheese but dyed green. We also get a callback to Sarah's friend Maureen, which I think is interesting and it shows consistency. And finally, my favorite line of these episodes is practicing for the Trader Day Parade von Blut. One, hilarious. Two, so funny. And just a banger of a line, especially for Chaotic. And, like, there's other iconic lines in these episodes. For example, I am a Marillion. Powerful. Every time he says it, you're like, shook, that's a twist. That's crazy. And, like, iconic. But practicing for the Trader Day Parade von Blut, like, Kaor did not have to do that, but he did. And that helps to build Kaor's character of not just is he good at discernment, he's good at reading Von Blut down, if you will. So on to final thoughts. My final thoughts of this episode is all in all, these are like top tier chaotic episodes. They are so good. The tension, the suspense, the deception, the power, the mystery, the intrigue. It's just so yummy, yummy, ooey gooey as a viewer. And I like how it's such a definitive jumping off point for the story ahead, right? We have kicked off the titular Marillion invasion, and I think that's like important. It lays the foundation, but it's also a milestone. This feels like a milestone episode in the series. And I think it is. It's memorable, it's exciting, it's just like truly top tier. Now, in my memory going into this episode, I thought it was just a lot of Falfor talking, and I also thought that like the 3 versus 1 beta drum battle was longer and more developed, but they really jump into that with no setup, and it's not a lot of Falfor talking. It's pretty much like he talks a bit, but it's broken up very well. And everything he says is either a twist, or it's new information, or it's jaw dropping. And honestly, the pacing is nice, and the door's opening is very climactic, and it's satisfying, and it's worrisome, and it's just so, so, so good. And I feel like I could talk about these episodes forever, but I have to cut it off somewhere, and so I'm gonna cut it off here. And I have to ask, what do you think? Do you like these episodes? Is there any analysis you've caught that maybe I didn't? And do you view this as the starting point of the Marillion invasion? Obviously, the Doors of the Deep Mine opening is climactic and like an exciting incident to what's to come, but how do you frame the season? This comes at a point, what, episode 12 and 13? So this is essentially the midpoint of the season. Season 2, there's 27 episodes in season 2, so the midpoint is like episode 14. So this comes right before the midpoint, and they have, like, in a meta sense, they've been building like things brick by brick. of the Danian parasites with Erasmus and the war beasts. And they've been very intentional by having episodes that build towards something in the future. And honestly, from this point forward, I don't have a whole lot of memory of what's to come in the upcoming episodes. Like, I remember the climactic payoff of, like, the finale and some bits and pieces here and there. But the journey we're about to take, I'm excited to take it once again. And a final brief anecdote is I feel like the last time I rewatched Chaotic, when I was watching the Marillion Invasion arc, in my head I kind of went, oh, that's it. Because to me, Chaotic is such a deep and lively world. Like, it has breadth and it has depth, and it's a world that it has a good sandbox. It has a good toolbox for you to play with. And so, like, when I was a kid and I was playing with toys or using my imagination, the Marillion Invasion was one that I feel like I revisited quite a bit. And so, whether it's building headcanons or like experimenting through play, like when I rewatched the series, I kind of went, "Oh, that's it?" Because in my head there was such a depth and breadth to it, and I still think there is, and I'm excited to get into it just because there's so much meat and potatoes and it's a good story. And what else would you want from a TV show? And with that, thank you so much for watching. What's your personal connection to the Marillion invasion? And I'll see you next time. Bye.